Sometimes it's like the more we try to protect by pretending like these things don't exist, the more danger we're actually creating.
You have to choose each other. You have to basically be, it's not even the in love thing. You have to be friends. You've got to be accepting. You want to be with the person. Like when we go out on date nights, it's like I look forward to it. Like it's not just about the sex.
My name is Abby, and I'm the voice behind the Evolving Love Project. In this podcast, my husband and I deep dive into the topics of non-monogamy and polyamory, drawing from our experiences of being consensually non-monogamous for almost a decade.
And my name is Liam. Whether you're monogamous, polyamorous, curious, or anything in between, we invite you to join us for this conversation.
Let's begin.
To celebrate the Australian release of her New York Times best-selling memoir, More, we are joined once again by Molly Roden Winter. And with her today, we also have the fortune of being able to speak with her husband, Stewart. Since Molly joined us on episode 23 of the Evolving Love podcast, she has quickly become a leading voice in non-monogamous discourse. More and Molly have appeared everywhere from the New York Times, Time Magazine, Savage Lovecast, The Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, and The Guardian.
As you will hear from this candid and at times raucous interview, Molly and Stewart have a remarkable connection and ability to deeply interrogate the way they move through the world. If you are Australian and want to see what you have been missing out on, you can get More at all the places that good books are sold.
Our conversation begins with a rolling start and discussions of how Stewart has navigated More's arrival in the world. And with that, we bring you Stewart and Molly Roden Winter. Because how much of the process were you a part of in terms of Molly's writing of the book, Stewart? Like, were you showing Stewart some of the early drafts, Molly, or was it like, surprise, here's the book, and now it's out in the world?
Yeah, no, he read the whole first draft, which is the one that was rejected by 50 agents also. Yeah. So he actually gave me writing feedback, which was reinforced by the publishing industry right after I said, you don't know what you're talking about. This is brilliant, and then it got rejected by 50 agents. And then I was like, okay, you're right. But just to your credit, Stewart was saying to me, I had done too much reassuring the reader that everything was fine now. And I was writing initially kind of from my older and wiser perspective. And Stewart, as well as the rest of the publishing industry, let me know that that's not a story, that I needed to bring the reader along with me for the ride. And part of what that meant was that we were going to really show all the ups and downs, all the, ugly face of it, and not just the joyous conclusions. So I think it ended up being a better book and a truer book because of Stewart's feedback.
I think also is that I was wondering if it would have been a better book if Molly could have referred to me as her future ex-husband in the beginning, because trying to figure out how to keep there's some element of suspense is kind of hard. But I think the final version of the book I thought was really well told, jumping around in time like a Tarantino film.
Because in the process of reading it back, Stu, and kind of reliving some of these amazing situations that Molly talks about within the book, did you feel it kind of added this added sense of reflection? Like you were able to revisit those and goes, oh, I never thought of it that way. Or maybe we had conversations around this when it was happening, but now with the added benefit of time, you can start to reframe things or look at things differently.
Oh yeah, it was like a giant marriage therapy session. Reading the book, I think in its final version was because I remembered the arguments that we had and the discussions. Molly has a very good memory for remembering everything I said, which is unfortunate in so many ways. But it was really, to relive it was actually pretty visceral for me. Like it was actually going through marriage therapy with my wife in absentia.
I will also say you relayed a compliment, which I felt really good about, that more than one woman in your life said, wow, she really nailed your voice. You know what I mean? That's exactly what you sound like. And I was like, yes.
Yeah.
So that was very validating.
Yeah, they were probably opinionated, dim-witted, nailed it.
Well, it was amazing reading More because almost straight away as I was reading it and reading, your voice in the story, Stu, I just couldn't help but think about Liam. There really were so many similarities in how things were, approached, or perspectives that you had, or the security and the sort of freedom for Molly to explore and the excitement for that. I mean, the similarities between the two of you were just amazing. And also I feel like, Molly, the similarities between you and I as well. So many of the growing and the sort of shifting and, early on in the piece saying, I don't want there to be, love in this open relationship space. I really do want it to be just a sexually based open relationship. And I'm really interested, to hear more about, your perspective on this, Stu, watching sort of Molly, on her journey going from, having this more sexual based open relationship to something that's a more sort of deeper experience in connections with other people, and how that was for you.
Well, it's funny. I'll go back to that. When you see Liam in the portrayal of me, I think there's a certain personality type that does well in an open marriage. I think you just have to hit the point in your life where you're confident enough in yourself, whether you've hit a certain point or you're just blind to all your own inadequacies, but that basically that you're able to allow someone to venture outside of the marriage and be okay that they're going to meet people and they might fall in love, but that you always will come back to each other. That takes a lot of confidence and a lot of, or maybe blindness or stupidity, but it's important. I think a lot of guys in open marriages that I've met, we all kind of belong to the same club.
I don't know, Abby, if you would agree. Are all the men you date similar to Liam? Because I don't find that. My current boyfriend, Jason, we jokingly call Australian Stu. He is Australian and Stu is New York Jason, or American Jason. And they love each other and they are quite similar. But not everybody that I've dated has been like you.
I think all the people in successful open marriages maybe.
Yeah, there are a few others that are still successful but are different. But yeah, to your point, I do think confidence is the baseline. And confidence in the relationship too. It's confidence in yourself and confidence in what we have.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think it has to happen at a point in the marriage where you guys know each other well enough that you have to you have to choose each other. You have to basically be, it's not even the in love thing. You have to be friends. You've got to be accepting. You want to be with a person. Like when we go out on date nights, it's I look forward to it. It's not just about the sex. It's about the fact that, we like the same things and we have the same sense of humor and we notice the same things. And there's always something to talk about. It's, there's a sweetness to that.
Having that baseline of friendship is so important. And I feel like actually being in an open relationship for Liam and I, it's been incredibly interesting because it has given us that opportunity to be each other's best friend and to really hone in on that aspect, supporting a partner through a disappointment or a breakup or something going a little bit weird. And it's I'm not going to make this about me right now. I'm going to just help you navigate through this thing and be there, be that, wingman or that, that person of support. And that's just been, for me, that's such a deepening aspect. That brings in such a deepening for us as a couple. It just makes us stronger even when there are those other things that we have to navigate through, which we really wouldn't have to navigate if we were monogamous. It's very rare that you would be in those types of situations if you were monogamous. So, yeah, it's incredibly interesting stuff.
Because you spoke about really beautifully, Molly, about in a podcast interview that I was listening to in preparation for this. And of course, you've done about 20,000 podcast interviews at this point. So, but you spoke about the one rule that you have, and maybe you've got more rules since this podcast aired. But it is kind of related to this, and I'd love for you to share the one rule that you have.
Yeah, the one rule is that whatever feelings come up, we have to take care of each other around those feelings, and so. I think what used to happen, and feel free to jump in if I misrepresent it all, but I think what used to happen is I would tell Stewart that I wanted to hear things about his relationships. And then as soon as he would tell me anything, I would get upset. And he would say, so I'm not going to tell you anything. And it kind of turned into this cycle of there was defensiveness on both sides and blame on both sides, and feeling like this was unjust. And it took us a while to get to an understanding of, okay, my jealousy isn't it's much less than it was, but it's not going to disappear completely. And for exactly the reason you were just saying, Abby, it was still so important to me to know what was going on for Stewart. And, maybe it's been a little refined since the last time I talked about this, Liam, but I feel like part of that is just, I care about Stewart. I want to know what's happening in his inner world. And I could also tell if something was not right with, especially like an important relationship of yours. If something wasn't right, I wanted to be able to talk to you about it and be there as your support. And I would feel guilty if I couldn't handle it. But I think what we've discovered is handling it might look a little different depending on, I can handle it. Sometimes I might need to pause and say, oh, can we just put a pin in that and come back to it? But I think I'm better at being your wingman, your confidant, than I used to be. And I think because of that, I think that was an important thing for us to move through, because otherwise we were just going to be having these two disconnected experiences without being able to share with each other. I've had a much easier time. Stuart's had a much easier time hearing about my experiences, including, mostly the things I want to talk about are the emotional things. And I think that's mostly what we do talk about now. Sometimes sex is wrapped up in that, but at this stage, I feel like it's more about the emotional nuances and the things that come up. And it's hard because nobody else really gets it. I can talk to friends of mine, but Stewart is the best person for me to talk to about other relationships. And I think I'm the best person for you to talk to.
Definitely. Molly's rule used to be, you can tell me anything you want, but make sure it's something that's really bad or horrific in the beginning. Like if something explodes, or if you spill something, or if, there's no chemistry, I want to hear about it. But,
yes. I mean, isn't it amazing? Some of those horror stories, those dating horror stories, even when they're happening, you kind of have this self-reflective in the moment part of you where you're like, oh, I can't wait to tell Abby about this. This is so weird. No one would fully appreciate. I could tell my friends, but they just wouldn't even understand the intricacies of how weird it got, because Abby knows me so well and knows even situations where other people wouldn't find weird, but Abby just knows that I just find so strange. I had a situation once where I was on a date and it was going really well, and I got back to her house and she just didn't put any music on at all. There was just no music. And I was like, if I say that out loud, I'm sure people listening to this podcast are going to go, yeah, it's not that weird. There's just no music on. Get over it. But I was like, come on, where's the vibe? I'm a musician,
right.
Stewart, you would understand this. I mean, you got to have a little soundtrack for the lovemaking, But Abby, as soon as I told Abby that, Abby was just like, oh, that would have driven you insane.
I was like, what did you do? You couldn't say something. You don't want to be rude. It's her space. She's created the atmosphere. You don't want to be looking for ways to improve, what she's set up.
Right. I got a few notes on your apartment.
Yes. I was like, oh my gosh, Liam, what did you do? It's just funny.
But then even crazier, and we're very good friends now, and I'm sure she wouldn't mind me sharing this, but she then put on Spotify, not on through a speaker, she put on Spotify through her phone, right? But then the Spotify had ads in it. So,
oh my God.
So it was happening, and then it was
jarring.
Then it was and you can get your free rugs, 2 for 1. I was like, what?
Liam, I really thought you were going to say that she started playing death metal or something, and I'm like, all right, yeah, that's.
That hasn't happened yet. Yeah. Speaking of what are the soundtracks that you guys put on? What music do you listen to?
I know. I always put Stewart in charge of the music. Well, here's the thing. Because of our kids, Stewart's always if our kids are home, ironically, he's like, if we play music, they're going to know we're having sex.
Yeah.
So we can't play music or whatever it is. I don't know. We're kind of in a mourning period right now. We love our kids. We have 2 weeks where our oldest is on tour and our youngest is still at school. and then our youngest is coming home next week, and then then we're back to
back
to roommates for no, I'm just kidding. We're if people think like when your kids get older, it's
Ma!
I know, right?
Are you guys having sex?
I know, right? I know people think it's like, oh, how do your kids deal with, your other relationships? They're like, just fine, because we're never at home for that. The issue is having sex with each other. That is what is the biggest issue for our kids.
Yeah.
It's like you would think that it's nobody likes to think of their parents having sex. I get it. We try to be discreet. We try to wait, but they stay up later than I do. I'm sorry. It'll never happen if we don't.
Yeah. How does an open marriage profoundly affect your children? By attempting to tie them to the boiler in the basement. That's how basically. Just for 2 hours. Don't worry about it. Just relax. We'll be right back.
We've just got an orgy happening upstairs. We've got all our friends coming over.
No,
Don't mind us.
We don't even have other people in the house. I want to make it clear we never have other people in our house. It's just for us. And it's like impossible.
Yeah.
So anyway, which is all to say, we play whatever music we like. When they're not here, we're so excited.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. We go from like, I think it's generally indie rock. And occasionally Spotify will play the same cuts that it likes, and it'll put like you'll play a something where you make sure, okay, this track of music is not it, and then Spotify decides to like, hey, we're gonna wing it, we're gonna throw this track on, and you're like, God damn, it takes you out of like, I hate that damn song, So yeah, we could probably make a lot of money.
You guys should make
maybe we should collaborate. We could do like a polyamorous playlist. Like soundtrack,
Yes.
Oh.
Like
how much time? That sounds kind of creepy.
It's incredibly creepy. That's why I think it'll work.
Yeah, we need it.
And maybe we could get Molly and Abby like doing like vocal ad libs or something. And so we're like,
ow, you're on my hair. Ow.
Can you tie your hair up, please? It's in my face.
Like, get the cat out of here. The cat. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. It's so hot, so much hotter than people realize.
Yeah. Could you shower after you manscape?
But I'm just going to say, though, I feel like that is maybe one of the big surprises that people don't expect. Like, yes, there is something really hot and sexy about, being with a new partner or being outside of your regular space. But I think the marital intimacy after 24 years, and I think because we've had this infusion of other people into our lives, our sex is like, it is simultaneously married sex and hot sex. You know what I mean? It's like we know each other so well. We laugh half the time. We really enjoy ourselves, and it's great. And it's very like familiar in a way that I really love. Yeah.
It's there's a comfort to it. And I think that's actually not making every sexual thing like it's July 4th and the prom, rolled in. You guys are Australian. Christmas and the prom. And, basically not making it so it's like, it's the big event. Like, this has got to be great. And, because sometimes sex is not great. Sometimes it's, it's like,
sometimes you got to call it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the patient's dead. Time of death is 10:03. And we're going to watch Netflix.
I love that, having that baseline of security and knowing each other so well, and then able to sort of like bring in new things and, bring in new exciting things. I think that actually happened to us last week. I mean, we don't often talk about our sort of sex life on the podcast.
You're bringing it out of us, guys.
I know you guys are bringing it out of us. But I feel like last week we were having sex and you were like, Abby, what is this? Like, you've never in the 12 whatever plus years that we've been together.
Abby was pulling this move, and I'm not going to get graphic, but it was a move that I had not experienced before, and I was like, hang on a second, like, is there, where did you pick this one?
Is there a
and Abby goes,
backstory?
yeah, I was like, and then what did you say? You were like, oh, I've known this forever, and I was like, nope, nope, it's a new one.
I was like, oh, don't I always do this? But I was like, yeah, it was so like fun. And I was like, well, you don't know everything about me, you know, like there's still some mystery here. You know, I've got things that you don't know. And Liam was just like, wow, like,
and then it just added to the eroticism of
just
it.
got so hot. You were like, what else? What else have you been hiding? And I was like, oh, you know, I'll show you at some point.
But it goes to that ability to have humor within the sex, because it was at the same time it was so hot, but it was also just so familiar but then novel at the same time, and that tension was what just kind of made it this like amazing experience.
Yeah. But it does give you that having an open relationship, right, does let you try things in the laboratory outside of the house, you know, and kind of let you, you know, like say like, I wonder if this is going to work. And sometimes, I mean, we've been together and like we'll do something that's different, and you know, I know that you're dying to ask, like, did you just, I'll ask later, like, you know, it's better not to, because God forbid I say, yeah, like, you know, Debbie taught me, and that's the end.
I don't like to like source the material. I just want to know, you know, I just want to bring the best stuff. But it's also funny too, because then I also feel like they're the greatest hits. And I just, sometimes I'm just like, I really want the greatest hits tonight. I don't want, you know, it's like, sometimes you just want to rewatch.
Yes.
Fuck Sex in the City. Bar. Right. You're just like,
yep.
Try something new another time. Exactly. I just want the greatest hits.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, Liam, you said something before that I wanted to ask you about. When you said you talked to your friends about the open marriage stuff, can your friends that are monogamous, that are non-open marriage people, are they able to listen to it and kind of be able to talk to you intelligently about it?
Do you have monogamous friends?
We do, but it is a quite a nuanced situation, I would say, and probably deserving of a longer answer than I'll give, I guess. But I have brought it up with all of my friends at this point. I mean, now that we got a podcast, we're on national TV, we kind of, at a certain point, it's like, we should probably address the non-monogamous elephant in the room. But you know, all of my friends have been really receptive. I've actually never had a situation where someone has challenged my ethics, which is, I think, what would probably really upset me is if someone was like, you're not ethical, you don't love your wife, you know, you're a bad father. Like that kind of stuff is the kind of nightmare scenario. But I will say that a lot of it, like the indifference has sometimes got to me in the end in a way that I've noted it, not been fussed by the indifference, but then as time has gone on, like some of my friends for, 10 years, I essentially have known about our open relationship. Like their complete indifference has affected our relationship, I would say, in a way that, and I think male friendships do have a different dynamic to female friendships as well. And because there's less kind of, there's not, I would say there's less contact between my male friends and myself and some of Abby's female friends, and they're talking all the time. So that if I am to catch up with a friend and it is we haven't talked in 6 months and they live in a different city, and then they're completely they don't acknowledge any of that aspect of my life, it feels like I'm not necessarily being seen in that friendship.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
That is actually something that I have to remind myself that, of course, they don't need to know everything. But it has meant that we have naturally gravitated towards friendships, often with non-monogamous people, not necessarily that we're romantically involved with, but people who just are happy to ask like the questions, like, and happy for me to share a story and not be weird about it. So yeah, how about you, Stu? What's been your experience with your male friends?
I wish I had as many enlightened friends as you did, not saying that all of your friends will stop listening. But even my closest friends, they're like, so how's open marriage going? And that lasts about a sentence or two. And I mean, I don't go, I was having sex like that. It's just like, well, I'm dating so-and-so. And it's just, I see them glaze over. And I've asked my closer friends, I'm like, why do you ask and then just not want to talk about it again? And they're like, because I hate you for it. Like, you get to do something I don't. And like, it's I thought I could handle it, but then I'm like, And all my friends think the same thing. Like, you waste a great opportunity. I would be out having sex all the time. And I'm like, dude, you would not. Like, it's so weird. It's like they don't want to talk about the romantic aspect. All they want to do is like, how come I can't do that?
So Molly, have you found that with your friends? Have you had a similar experience to Stewart with some of your friends?
I think it's been a lot easier for me, a lot easier. And I think in the early days, my friends were worried about me and worried about whether or not I was going to blow up my marriage and things like that. I had maybe a couple friends who wished that they could have an open marriage, and then one asked and was told no. But the conversation, I think, yielded some really good changes in their marriage and new freedoms for her that weren't about, sex with other men, but it was about things that she needed in order to kind of be fed. So she credits, our conversations with helping her to ask for what she needed in her marriage and for it getting better as a result. So I think that's really cool. And I think, the book coming out and also, my friends who read the book, which is just about all of them, I feel like they got a better understanding of what those first few years were like, because I wasn't sharing a lot because it felt too shameful for me. Too taboo. And I just didn't want to open myself up to the questions and the critique. And I did get from a couple of friends the being worried about my kids in a way that was upsetting to me. So yeah, now every friendship I have has evolved tremendously in this respect. It's kind of hard now that, and I feel like the book is kind of a way in for you and your friends. You know what I mean? Like your friends will now be like, they don't actually want to talk about your current experiences, but they'll be like, how are you doing with the book, Stu? Right. Like, what's going on with the book? Right. It just, kind of feeling like, oh, you must be going through it right now. But
short and proud, really.
And I think it's gonna move the needle slowly towards a little more. I think it has moved the needle towards more acceptance and being like, okay, they're really owning this. This is not a stage. This is not a they're not going to grow out of this. This is what they're doing. And they've been doing it for a while, and clearly they're happy. And so I think that's been the biggest thing for my friends. I don't know. It wasn't because of my marriage that I wasn't happy. You can't be happy all the time, for one. But I think I was really struggling in the early years of becoming a mom. And I think that's true for so many women. I think I was overwhelmed and trying to find myself. And so my path has been one that's led me to a lot of wonderful things. And, and most of my friends have met at least one or both of my current two partners, and will happily hear me talk about them. So it's all pretty good.
Yeah.
I feel that people tend to feel more comfortable when they can feel that you're comfortable in it, and it's not like they're sort of on the journey of a bit of worry or fear or how will this go. And I think for Liam and I, it's been a little bit easier for us in a way, because we were quite private about it with our monogamous friends and the monogamous people in our life. We didn't tell them about it. We told our family, after we'd been practicing, non-monogamy for, a long time. So it was sort of like, well, nothing's really changing too much. It's just that now a little bit more about us, as where I think if I had told, my parents, when we were sort of just starting to open up, there's more fear there, because especially when people love you and they know you as a couple and they know you as a unit, they're sort of on that journey and thinking, well, we don't want it to go wrong. And, there can be a lot of like love and care even behind that sort of fear as well. And, just sort of remembering that. But I think there is definitely a strength in sort of, telling people when you are quite sort of secure in your choices and where you're at now as well. So I'm curious to know how people have gone, people in your life how they've gone with receiving the book or finding out about you guys, perhaps in the New York Times or, them, because there must have been people who didn't necessarily know about your non-monogamy, but then found out about it when you were everywhere.
Do you want to go first?
I'm going to go first because I'm going to start with the most extreme version. My mom, when Molly first got the book deal, Molly and I discussed it, and she's like, look, you're going to have to tell your 87-year-old mother that, like, it's the book's coming out and we're in an open marriage. And I chose one night to tell my mom. She was very quiet, and she's like, she just didn't understand. She kept saying, she's German. So she definitely did not understand because they are very loving people. Just joking. My mom's family was really uptight. They were incredibly uptight. But my mom said, I'm going to die. I want to die before the book comes out. And I'm like, yeah, she did. That's
the punchline. Oh my God. I thought that was just...
She, like, months before the book came out, she's like, fuck it, I'm out of here. And her health, like, yeah, she was just like, good luck, fuckers.
I don't think that's why she died.
What a coming out story, though.
I know, exactly. Like, well, we got to watch who we tell this to.
I feel like it actually brought you guys closer, though, because you told her you had a lot of healing with her towards the end. Not to be, I mean, it makes a good joke, but I think it's also true that being able to talk to her about it, and then the way Stewart's mother is, she was so excited about the Doubleday deal. Like, that just made, and then if I was like, anything that she could brag about, it went from like, oh my God, I don't want to tell anybody, to like, oh wait, Doubleday? You know what I mean? And then she was like telling her friends. And so, and she gave me on her deathbed, she was also an M. Her first name started with M. So she gave me an M necklace when she was on her deathbed, and I wear it I wore it in the New York Times photo because I knew she'd love that. Like, I'm like, we're in the New York Times, Mom. You know what I mean? She would have loved that. So I think she would be very proud. And as soon as, you get something to brag about, she's all in. And she would have defended us fiercely.
I know. I think she would. But I think she's like,
she didn't really want to have to deal with it. That is true. But I felt her support all the way to the end.
Yes.
Something that I didn't know when I was on the podcast the last time, just back in March, we went on a family vacation, and my oldest confessed, the book opens with him finding out about the open marriage. And that's all true. But he, a year before that, went into my closet and read my diary from my 20s, which includes, like, when we had a threesome before we got married and sex club trips and, like, quite a bit.
Wow.
That he told me at age 22 that he had found it when he was 12. And so he already had some questions about what was going on with us because we were inviting other people into our relationship. He didn't know what was happening when he saw Stewart's OkCupid profile. But in some ways, I'm so glad that he asked, that he came to me when he saw that and asked, because he already had plenty swimming around in his head about, like, what is going on with my parents. And I mean, I remember finding even just like Playboy and Playgirl magazines in my parents' closet. And we didn't talk about sex, though. We just, even though, my parents had an open marriage, I didn't see any evidence of it. But I knew they were sexual people because I found their pornos. And I just, I think that we often believe that we're hiding things from our children. And instead, they're just left without the conversation piece to accompany it, that, this is we have a sex life that we define and we are honest with each other about. It's nothing you have to worry about or think about. You're going to make your own choices when you're a grown up. But this is normal and natural, and we love each other, and there's nothing you have to worry about here, kiddo. Just to, as opposed to like, shock and shame. I think as soon as you show shame, it cuts down the conversation because and a kid feels like there's something wrong here. So that's, I think I did have shame when my oldest first confronted me about it. I had a lot less when my youngest did 4 years later. And so I think that has been really positive. And I think, as much as we're saying like, oh God, he's going to come home, but he really will. Like, babe, are you guys having sex? Like, what I mean? And we're like, go away. You know what I mean? But at the same time, he knows that it's not something we're ashamed of and that it is, he's gotten better. He's got some impulse issues. So it's like the door locks. He doesn't knock anymore.
No, now he just tries the door.
No, yeah. Now he just like, sometimes you can tell he's like quiet on the stairs, like, are they doing what I think they're doing? And it's like, oh God. But I feel like there is something healthy about just, it's healthy to have the boundaries and it's also healthy to have the conversation. And if you think you're hiding things from your kids, you might not find out till much, much later what they found and when. So that is my cautionary tale to any parents out there listening. Like, not that you want to give an age inappropriate explanation. 6 is, you don't need to worry about it. But like, if that's still floating around at 12, you should probably, say there are some things that you don't need to know about that's private and that's ours. But rest assured, your mother and I love each other, and these are our special things that are just, for us and not for you. And I think, I don't know, what do you think of that?
Oh, I definitely wholly agree I think our kids are, I think it's a good mix of, we talk about stuff and they ask us questions, or at least one kid asks a lot of questions. But yeah, for the most part, it's we, any question they ask, like we always warn them, you want to know, we'll tell you. And that's,
right. Like, retract your question now, or like, I'm going to give a slow answer. So if at any moment you would like to say, oh, too much, you know what I mean? I try to do that.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll say it's none of your business. And that's a great answer.
Yeah.
I think, if they're asking something that really isn't, I'm like, and I'll talk about that. I won't say it I try not to say it in a antagonistic way, but like, honestly, that's private and that's my business. And now that they're of an age where they definitely want their privacy, they're grateful that I don't snoop into their business. I don't track them on their phones. I don't read their text messages. I trust them, and I trust them to let me know if they need to talk about something. And for the most part, I mean, the things that both of them have brought to us lets me know that they do talk to us. I mean, if there's something bigger that they've hidden, we don't know, but there have been some pretty big things that have come up. So I'm glad about that.
The one thing I think we can pull out of all this discussion is that we could all make a lot of money if we invent the dead man's switch for personal items, that basically if you don't on your phone, if you don't use it like in 48 hours, it asks, are you dead? And if you don't answer, all your stuff
everything
gets
explodes.
Exactly. We'll sell a box.
There's an app for that.
Is there? There
no,
should be.
I'm just saying there could be an app for that.
Okay, so we're going to put a trademark right now.
The Stewinator.
Just no, please. Oh God, no.
Well, it really does speak to the importance of having just that strong communication, but also kind of showing your children an example of what a healthy, communicative, loving relationship looks like. Like your kids, even though there's that, going up the stairs and hopefully mum and dad aren't having sex, it's like you guys are having sex. Like that's
a good thing.
This is a great thing, and it shows that there's a connection there. And I mean, now you are on the grandest of levels with the book and all the publicity. Your kids are watching you guys have these beautiful conversations, putting your relationship on display, in a way that people can kind of try and pick holes in it or whatever. But if anyone listens to you both talk, or even listening to this episode, there is no one who could come to the conclusion that you guys aren't madly in love, have amazing communication. And of course, we can all improve on things, and, we're all works in progress. But it's such a beautiful thing to be able to platform and to have the bravery to actually go out for your kids to see that, to then go, my parents are fucking amazing.
Thank you. And I think our kids are really cool too, because I think there are a couple things that are cool. One thing is that they both really have their own lives and they're very involved in their own stuff to the point that they're not lying around on the couch being like, oh my God, they're busy. They're out there. They are making things happen. And I love that they are launched so fully so that they don't have to, worry about what's happening at home. Or people have asked, how are they taking it with the book? Fine, because it's not in their world, that's this is not the target market, 20-year-old boys. And
it
it
should
was
be
sweet though. Maybe it should actually. Oh my God. One of our friends, I've got to tell this. They're, I don't know how I feel about this. Their 13-year-old read our book. Remember that?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Read my
There's
book.
some interesting conversations around that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And this was a couple that was a little bit concerned about us, to say the least. So, but what my friend, so it's my friend who's married to his friend, and she and his friend was like, "What are you doing, letting him read Molly's book?" And she said, "I would rather have him learn about sex from a grown woman I trust than from porn."
Yep.
So it's
my
like,
goodness.
I'm
Gosh.
not
Amen.
suggesting we stalk any, before anybody starts like, putting me on Tucker
Required reading
Carlson or
lists.
something. Yeah, right. I don't want to be on the banned book list for school. I'm not saying that. But I thought it was interesting that was her take. I was like, wow. And apparently his only comment was, yeah, she's a good writer. He's a funny kid. Anyway.
He's a very funny businessman.
But they have a very open dialogue, I
Yeah.
will say that. And so every parent is going to make their own boundaries, their own decisions in a different spot. But I think erring on the side of love and honesty can't be wrong.
And also just being in the real world. It's like at 13, those teenage years. These days, people, we have the internet, we have full access to everything. There's full access to porn, and so I think there would be some naivety to think that, these teenagers are not sort of engaging in that secretly in their own way. It's sort of in a similar way that when your parents were out and you found the magazines, it's like they're going to go to it anyway. And it's so true. It's like learning about the nuances of like relationships and care, and because there are just so many beautiful lessons in your book, the communication between you both, the way you navigate this and the sexuality, all of the sexual things as well. But it's like it paints a more full, like a really full picture of relationships. And at first when you hear that, a 13-year-old reading the book, I do have
I know, and I'm not condoning it. I'm not advocating it.
Well, no, but I do have that reaction where I'm like, oh gosh, yeah, that is young. But then when you look at how, teenagers are these days, it's like, actually, no, that fits, Yeah, it's
right,
really interesting.
It could. And I used to teach 8th grade, and there were always some parents who were worried about, what we were reading and what I was allowing a kid to read for a book report or something like that. And there was always such a range, but especially with the way media is, the way social media is. I mean, you don't have to scratch the surface to, and I think also, there are a couple states now where porn has been banned.
You have to identify. You have to identify yourself, provide identification before you can access any sites.
Right. There are a couple, and what has happened is that porn on the dark web, which is the least regulated and the most misogynistic, violent, what have you, that's what kids are going to be able to find. And so it's like sometimes it's like the more we try to protect by pretending like these things don't exist, the more danger we're actually creating. So if you want, I believe, if you want your children to have, the values you have, you need to talk actively about it. And if you just pretend like sex doesn't exist, you're not going to, someone else is going to educate your kids for you. And that's dangerous.
Yeah, it's amazing the visceral response I felt when you said 13-year-old. In my mind, I was just like, that's insane. But as Abby said, and as you said, I really feel that one of the benefits for non-monogamy and the ability of being able to talk about this openly and the importance of sharing stories like this is non-monogamy is so much more important than just, you know, the sexuality or you know, just all the kind of the juicy stuff. There's so much that can be learned, you know, for for someone who is younger. And this is why it's so important that there are those conversations in a school environment, you know, about different types of sexuality, different kind of trying to destigmatize, you know, as much as possible. I've been reading the new book by Jonathan Haidt, The Anxious Generation, which speaks a lot to this. I don't know if you've read it yet, but it's really an incredible read. And any person who has kids, you know, who are growing up into their teenage years, it's just so important for them to read it. And I'm giving it to every parent I know. But, you know, maybe I should also, as part of that, be going, you know, you should be having these open conversations. You should read more.
Okay. I'm afraid of that takeaway, like of that being the soundbite. Like Molly Roden Winter says, no, right. No. But I hear what you're saying. Yeah, go ahead.
Hold it. What about like the more coloring book?
No.
Yeah.
Damn it.
Yep. So have you found that your kids have been kind of engaging in the kind of almost like the business side of like the book launch? Like, are they invested in terms of like, yeah, go mom, you're a New York Times bestseller. Like, let's take you out for dinner. Like
Our youngest, actually, I mean, you say he's excited, but I don't see him very excited. He's basically like, I'm going to college. I don't want anyone to know.
But meanwhile, he told his roommate, and his roommate was like, "Hey, Mrs. Winter, congrats on the book." You know what I mean? Like, I was FaceTiming.
Talk about
with
a
him.
college
So I'm like,
crush for the mum.
I don't know.
Yeah.
All right. But it was sweet. I was like, because, you know, nobody would know unless my son told them my mom wrote this book, because there's no way to like really connect them. You know, no 19-year-old's going to connect those dots. A couple people have reached out to my son on his social media and said like, wait, is this your mom? And he was like, no, it was cool though. Nobody said anything weird.
One of my employees though asked like, one of the guys I work with was like, so does your son, like when he writes music, does he mention, does he have any like hidden things about open marriage? And at first I'm like, maybe. Like, I gotta start reading his lyrics more.
That would, you know, make it seem like he's actually, that we are part of his interior world, which we are not. He has got his own thing happening. But yeah, no, I don't think it's affected them very much, in a way that makes me really glad, like that the book hasn't affected them. And I think the timing of it really worked out, that it was, you know, they're both on their path, and I'm glad about that. I mean, I think I'm proud of it, and I'm proud of our story, and I think it's all positive, but I also think it could have been a little dicier for them to have to navigate it. We would have made it through either way. It was a little easier with them both doing their own thing.
One of the things about parenting that I always, you know, like new parents and stuff, like, is basically you have to be yourselves in front of your kids. Like everyone's like, well, you should fight elsewhere. Molly and I fought in front of the kids. Like when we fought, we wanted them to see that we are gonna not get along. And there's going to be moments when we're going to make up, but we'll always love each other. And I think that's like my standard, like rule number one for, you know, parenting is like, you have to be yourself, because your kids, they see through the bullshit quite easily. And that goes for for your relationships and how you treat them. And if you don't always have to be, you know, sweetness and light. If you're unhappy, be like, hey, I can't talk right now or whatever. I think you have to be your most genuine self, because your kids they know you better than you think they do.
And then you're giving them permission to be their whole selves.
Exactly.
And so,
damn right.
you know, that they can be angry, they can be sad, they can make a mistake, they can, you know, learn.
Yeah,
admit a weakness.
Yeah, we saw Dad try to put furniture together. I feel better about me. Yeah.
It also gives them an opportunity to witness the repair that needs to happen in a relationship as well. It's like there's a rupture, there's something that's happening, there's a disagreement, but then like we come back together and we talk through it and we come out the other side. And, you know, for children to witness that too, I think we actually, you know, obviously it's like, you know, we're in a relationship, we're in the kitchen, we get stressed, things are happening, you know, but we do make that point of like saying in front of our son, you know, oh, you know, I actually said the wrong thing, or that wasn't very nice of mummy, or that wasn't nice of Daddy, I'm sorry for saying that. Like actually really, modeling that, because they take that all in, and that's all part of relating.
It's a difficult time of the month for mummy, it's all right. We'll give her some grace.
I know, right? I was going to say, like, it all depends on who's saying what. I'll be like, Daddy's having a really rough day, clearly, and Daddy shouldn't have said any of those things. I know, you have to only speak for yourself. Yeah, no, my poor kids have learned way more about perimenopause than they ever wanted to know. I'm like...
Will be... that should be the coloring book, maybe.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
Why is there only one color?
Well, speaking of kind of perceptions, obviously we're talking about, the way in which you kind of model your relationships in front of your kids. But there's been so much discourse and so many kind of people trying to take hot takes away from the book, Molly. But I wonder whether... What's been like a mischaracterization that has really kind of stuck with you and kind of really taken you away and gone, oh, okay, like this is such an intense thing, maybe because there's potentially some truth in it where you can talk to each other about, or it's just so kind of far-fetched that it's just outside of the realms of appropriate analysis of the book?
Yeah, well, there's been a hot topic has been, did Stewart manipulate me into the open marriage? And it was even discussed on Dan Savage's like thread. It was like a question that came in after I was a guest. And so I put that on my Instagram because his answer was the question was, do you think, Molly's husband manipulated her into an open marriage? And he wrote, when I read the reviews, I thought so, but when I read the book, I did not think so. But I do know people are, it came up at the podcast I did yesterday. I feel like anytime you're writing your memoir, it's like I tried to represent 10 years in 300 pages. And there was a moment, and I tried to be really honest about things that we really did talk about. It was tough for me at first. I did want to do this first. Stewart encouraged it, but I wasn't going to do it. He didn't tell me, you must sleep with this guy. He was like, you should go for it. And I really wanted to, so I did. And we didn't do the thing. I got asked to be on another podcast that's not going to happen till the fall now, I think. But she sent me these preliminary questions, and one of them was, do you think you would have benefited from a open marriage coach in the early days? And I just busted out laughing because the idea of an open marriage coach in 2008 is like, I'm like, that was not a thing. You know what I mean? I would have loved to have met that open marriage coach because I don't know who they would have been. But sure, yeah, if that existed, yes, but it didn't. So we just jumped in and then had issues and then figured that out after the fact as opposed to discussing it in advance. So we didn't have a plan. You know what I mean? We didn't do the thing of like, okay, so if you do this, how will you feel if I then also want to have relationships? And neither one of us could have possibly known how we would feel. I also think despite your best intentions, and you can read all of the research and do all the coaching, and it can still be really, really hard once you face your jealousy head on. So I don't know that coaching would have done anything necessarily, but I think because I was very honest about our own struggles in those early years and some of those arguments, and my, I asked my therapist, I was like, do you think, was this my idea? And he, it's in the book. My therapist was like, seems like it was, Molly. You know what I mean? It's like everybody, but just because I asked the question, other people kind of glommed onto that and like, oh, and I was crying. Oh, she was miserable. She was in agony. There was a really hilarious Daily Mail piece about like, I was in agony and crying all over the place. And it's like, yes, I was crying, but crying means that you're working through some really deep stuff. And I feel like monogamy is not easy, and non-monogamy is even harder. So if you're going to do this, I wanted to tell my story as honestly as I could, which was warts and all. And as I said, to Stewart's credit, he was like, no, tell it, and wanted encouraged me to tell, he's like, nobody's going to believe you if you're just like, oh yeah, now I'm not jealous at all. That just sounds like bullshit, because you have to see how bad it was and like what were those kind of turning point moments. And so I really tried to capture the moments when I experienced something in a different way, or our fights took like a slightly different turn, or a marriage is made up of all these little micro moments, and I couldn't, it would have taken, you can't even do a 10-year story in 10 years because it's everybody's perspective, right? So to encapsulate it in something small, you pick and choose the moments that you're going to bring to life to tell the truest story you can. And of course, there's going to be some people who will interpret it differently, and people bring their own experience to every thing they read. So, somebody will read Anna Karenina and think like, oh my God, that was amazing. And others will be like, oh, Leo Tolstoy was, misogynist pig, or, I don't know. It's no author is spared. I'm not saying I'm Tolstoy, but I'm just saying you bring your own life experiences when people view me as a character in this book. And I did have to present myself. That's what you do in a memoir when you tell your story as a story. So it's something that I feel bad because I don't want people to think that about Stewart, or to think that I'm this like weakling, but I also feel like we can handle it. And so
but the thing that surprised me most is the judginess that happened. Like, people were writing things in reviews, and it was obvious they hadn't read the book, and they had just read, as Molly said before, like the reviews. And they were making these pronouncements, and I was really pissed in the beginning because I was like, I'm going to write every single one of these assholes. And then, and then everyone said, like, no, you never engage, like, no matter what they say. And that's true, because if they're just looking, the internet is like open mic night. Like, everyone gets to be the same volume, for one point, and everyone's trying to, like, here's my 5 minutes, I was going to say the C word, but I figured it. Yeah, but yeah, basically, it's just like you're giving the same attention to everyone, and everyone gets to say. And if you get they're desperate for fame, or just to defame and be trolls, and I never had that experience. Even in my own experience, writing copy for my for other people, I've insulted people, but I've never had the kind of blowback where people says like, you must be a horrible person. And I'm like, well,
when all these kind of reviews started coming out, and I read them all because I was just so interested to see how the book would be received, having read it and then thinking, like, how are people going to kind of contort this in a way that will get clicks, will be that outrage piece about polyamory and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of it, like the Daily Mail, like you referenced, like, that's all trash. It's very easy to discount that. There were some really interesting pushbacks on the book, and the Atlantic piece I found really interesting. And we actually, on behalf of you guys, I was like, I'm going to fight for Molly's honor, So I reached out to the author. I reached out to the author, and I invited him. Yeah, I did. And I invited him on the podcast because, in particular,
Seriously?
because he brought up some really interesting things that I thought was quite in particular, the relationship between people who engage in polyamory and class structures. And I thought, actually, that is a critique. He said a lot of stuff about your experience and about Stu's experience. I felt just kind of completely missed the point. And that was the kind of stuff that really annoyed me. But even within that, and it was a beautifully written piece. Like, this guy was clearly a thoughtful writer. I felt like he was coming at it from the wrong way. I think in the piece, he actually acknowledged his own biases and where he was coming from, it being monogamous and, having resistance to the concepts. But he brought up this interesting thing that I'd love to know your thoughts about. He said he drew a correlation between, in his mind, between people who are this has become like polyamory and non-monogamy has kind of become something for the the mid upper classes to be able to explore, because only they have the opportunities and the time and the luxury to be able to get their hotel suites, to be able to do all this. And I thought, that is, like, we know people who are non-monogamous from all across, different, all across the social class spectrum. So, instinctually I felt that wasn't true, but I wonder what your thoughts are on that kind of argument.
Him portraying the whole open marriage thing is like the Downton Abbey of relationships irritated the fuck out of me. And it's like, because it's like he was basically saying, and I mean, my friends, he brought things into it. It wasn't just social. It was like, it became a race thing too. And it's like, and hang on, I'm not saying that he but like people were interpreting it because it's New York and it's Brooklyn. And I'm like, no, like that is so not the point. It's about the human experience, and it's not about class. And if you can't have sex in a hotel, you find a way to have sex. Like water will find its lowest, the lowest level. And like, I got really frustrated about that because like, you rich people and, the crap you do, like, it's not about that. It's not about that at all. And not once in Molly's book. I mean, she said, and she says at one point, like, we're lucky enough to have this. Like, there is a certain amount of gratitude, but her story is a memoir. It's not a how-to book.
Yes.
And that it's her experience. And now Molly is going to talk, or the top of her head will blow off.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay. First of all, I feel like I don't think it, I'm trying really hard not to push back on any criticism of me because I am privileged and I do acknowledge my privilege. I think the problem was as you said, Liam, using me as the poster child for polyamory and extrapolating like, oh, if she does it. And I don't know if it happened in that story. It was in the New Yorker that there were like 3 examples of like how polyamory is for rich people. Shiv from Succession, Daphne from White Lotus, and me. And I'm like, they're fictional. They're not poly. And like, so really we're just back to me again. And so one of my favorite comments in that, I didn't read many comments, but I saw one that said, I'm poly and I'm broke. Do your research. And I love that. And because I was like, I can't say it because I'm privileged. So but that's, the comments are where other people can take it up. I have presented my story and my side of the story as well as I can. And then once I put it out in the world, if people want to, engage around this, and I was really happy to see how many people were just saying, like, you can't take one person's memoir and build an argument around it. Where is your data? What are you talking about? And when it's come up in relation to my book and my story, I mean, my parents were poly. They were both school teachers in the Midwest. And, my dad likes to go camping. You can go camping with another woman for free. You know what I mean? It's like, this is not this. You don't have to have a certain amount of money. And I also feel like we wouldn't say the same thing about monogamy. Like, I mean, although people might, that you have to be pretty rich to be monogamous. You have to be pretty rich to sustain a nuclear family in New York City. That's why a lot of families leave. So like, I don't know that that is an argument against, polyamory nearly as much as it is around like New York City prices. It's like there's that argument. And then the final thing I've said and feel is that because of my privilege, I can come out as non-monogamous. We've talked about this in our non-monogamom chat group, which I still very much love, Abby. That I can come out as non-monogamous because I really do have nothing to lose. To answer an earlier question you had, Liam, is yes, I have had cousins, I have had old neighbors reaching out to me saying like, I didn't know, I lived around the corner from your parents for 20 years and I never knew that, that kind of thing. But nobody that's like real in my life has given me any backlash. My kids are fine. I'm not going to be ostracized. There is actually no real, people say it's brave, but I had nothing to lose. If I were living in a very conservative place, if I relied on my family for childcare, if I worked a minimum wage job where if I got stigmatized, I could be, fired. If I have to be able to tell this story so that other people with less power can tell their stories. And so I feel like it's really problematic if we try to shut down any story if you are not disadvantaged enough, or you are not marginalized enough to tell this story.
Yes.
But guess what? Marginalized people are marginalized. That's why their stories aren't getting picked up. And like all of the press attention I've gotten, I will own it is, if I were not a white lady in Park Slope, this would not be news. This would not be news. It's because I look like, some stereotypical thing that is not supposed to be sexual or, is so mainstream. If I were less mainstream, nobody would have published my book or bought it or written about me in the New York Times. So it's this catch-22, and it can feed itself. Like, fine, I got this attention, and then people use this. Well, this person is like this. That means all poly people must be like this. And it's just like such a fallacy, start to finish. So I was glad to see in the comments people responding in a way of like sort of sharing some of their stories and saying like, not all poly people are rich. Like if you have 3 incomes, thruples are the most, it's the most kind of anti-capitalistic thing you can do to sort of live communally, raise your children together, doing open marriage the way we did it. Yes, but if we did it differently, then they'd be attacking us for something else. So it's you can't win. And so I'm going to let people, do what they're going to do in the comments, and hopefully they can work it out amongst themselves.
I just completely agree with that and resonate with that so much. That's why I like to share as well in this way. It's like, using the privilege to just get the word out there and to just show that this is a normal thing, so that like other people who don't have that voice, they can see that. Or maybe they're, if there's a conservative, mum out there somewhere and she's going, oh, actually you can like be a good parent and also have this way of being, and like that's actually okay. And then if, they have children who are non-monogamous, there's that softening to that because they've seen it. We've got to have like some representation out there. Yeah, that just annoyed me so much when that was all happening for you, because it's like it's your private memoir, it's not your like stance across everything. And it's just I think using the privilege,
because we had a conversation night recently, and a few people shared within the night that they felt that before they kind of came across people talking about non-monogamy, they felt inherently broken as a person. And it's such a sad thing, and there were multiple people in the room. There was 27 people at this particular night, but there were multiple people in the room who said, yeah, that was me too. And it speaks to the importance of you being able to share your story, and like you're saying, use your privilege, whatever privilege you might have, to be able to put that story out, because it actually means that people who don't have that privilege can then latch onto it and be seen, be heard, and go, I'm not a broken person.
And recognize themselves. And we recognize ourselves in other people across class lines, across racial lines. When we're talking about human emotions, the details might look different, but I have also gotten some really lovely messages from women in Maine or women in Tennessee or women who are not in, some shishi neighborhood in Brooklyn who are just living regular lives and are non-monogamous. And they are feeling seen because of that story. I wanted to ask you, Liam, though, you said you invited the author onto the podcast. Did he accept?
He did not. He actually didn't reply to me. He's a professor. I forget at where, but I sent him a follow up too, and maybe I'll send him another follow up. Who knows? I mean, sometimes
I think you should.
Just say, we just had. Maybe you already said. Yeah. I mean, he probably doesn't care, but I think that was a very generous offer of you.
Well, I wanted him. I actually, as part of asking him on, I sent him the conversation that we'd had, and I felt like if this guy just listens to that, like surely it would just disprove a lot of the bullshit that he was kind of talking about. And funnily enough, we had Christopher Ryan on the podcast,
right.
And he was also really upset about that article as well. And so we kind of bonded over that. And of course, he's, looking at things in terms of like human nature and like the evolution of everything. And he has a lot of things to say about, whether it's like an upper class, like a new age kind of, a pursuit.
It's pretty old. It's older than monogamy. Yeah.
Well, that's it. But I think we should wrap up because otherwise we're just going to talk for possibly forever.
I know, right? Well, we're going to get together in either New York or Australia one of these days.
Yeah, guys, thanks so much for coming on today. It's been just amazing. And I feel like we need to have a part 2 of this, of the four of us, but possibly a part 3 and a part 4. I feel like there's so many different things that we could talk about. But thanks so much for sharing so generously. And Stewart, it was amazing to have you on today and have your voice be part of the conversation. And yeah, I really look forward to chatting with you both again.
I hope we can do that. Thank you so much. It was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun.
What a joy to be joined by Molly and Stewart today, and we hope you've enjoyed this conversation. More is now available to purchase in Australia, and we've put the link in our show notes so that you can buy the book. Thanks for tuning in to the Evolving Love podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and leave a comment on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback and support fuels our passion, and together we're building a community of curiosity, kindness, and growth.
If you would like to show your support and are interested in accessing 2 extra podcast episodes each month, along with access to my exclusive writing, you can become a premium subscriber over at evolvingloveproject.substack.com. Subscribe, comment, and let's keep the conversation going.